Good evening. Thank you very much. Um, okay, there we go. So yeah, my name is Jorge Antonio Vallejos, and I run blackcoffeepoet.com. So the question was the first poem you remember. The first poem I remember is written by a Chicano guy. I forgot his name. And so it's about this young guy who's just like, you know, when you're 12 or 13, especially if you're a guy, you start getting all these things in your head and you think you're tough. And he's walking down a laneway in LA behind his house and he's throwing punches in the air and punching a wooden fence and he's kicking a Coke can and scaring pigeons. And then he's right behind his house, and so his grandmother walks out as she's sweeping, punches him in the nose, and starts bleeding. She goes, "Get the fuck inside." And that was it. And I remember that poem, but I forget the guy's name. Anyways, yeah, it's a great poem, and I love that poem. So, first I'm going to start off with a essay in this book, and there's a picture in my bag that's rolled up. You can pass it around from the side, I believe. Yeah. So basically, there's a painting by Jorge Gonzalez Camarena, and boy, I really anglified that name right now. Jorge Gonzalez Camarena. I saw it in Mexico, and it's of a conquistador and an indigenous warrior, and they're in an embrace, and they're both stabbing each other, and it's called a hug, el abrazo. So as soon as I saw that, I was like, man, that's me, you know what I mean? I'm part Spanish, I'm part indigenous, and then I've got some more stuff, because my dad's Arab, and then my mom's quarter Chinese, etc. But I was like, that is me right there. So we had to write an essay for class, and I was in Mexico doing a course, contemporary art and politics in contemporary Mexican society. So I went back to where I was staying, and this is what came out. And then I waited for a while, and then I found an opening. You know, they were looking for stuff for a special issue in the Kenyon Review, winter 2010. And it's edited by Simon Ortiz, who's a very well-known, like, native poet. He's from Acoma Pueblo in the States, and he opened the doors for people like me and other brown folk and native folk, etc. And lots of people are in here, like Leslie Marmon Silko and Leanne Howe, and a whole bunch of people that I'm so honored to be with. So this is my biggest publication to date, creative-wise. So I called it Embracing My Identity, Reflections on Jorge Gonzalez Camarena's painting, El Abrazo. Red comes at me hard. Thoughts of high-pitched screams, sharp abdominal pains, crunching bones, and pierced organs as a glimmering sword enters a brown body and comes out bloodstained. This being symbolic of indigenous women on their backs, forced to give birth to the mestizaje, and that in turn symbolizing the rape of Pachamama, Mother Earth, who now bears catastrophes in response to oil drilling, mine excavating, and countless other forms of exploitation. Un abrazo, a hug, is traditionally thought of as a display of affection, an embrace that brings two or more people together, a form of bonding. But was it bonding or bondage that occurred in the Americas when several nations from Europe invaded? Jorge Gonzalez Camarena's painting, El Abrazo, brings to mind how Western civilization came into being, hellatry. Broken are the pieces of wood on the ground that Camarena paints, broken like the false identity of the people born of the colonization of indigenous land, broken like the religious laws that the colonizers supposedly practiced and enforced on indigenous populations. Broken like the original ways of life of many of the first peoples of the land now called Mexico, named after the Mexican people, better known as the Aztecs. ¿Tú eres original de esta tierra?" I said to a Mayan woman at the Mercado Libertad in Guadalajara, Mexico. "Sí," she responded, her smooth, tanned face, braided black hair, and short height patiently stood in front of me as I peppered her with questions. Her friends were selling handmade garments and traditional regalia at a booth. My traveling partners looked at their merchandise with tourist eyes. While they thought of deals on clothes, I thought about how the ground I was standing on belonged to this woman's ancestors, to her and her children if she has or plans to have any. When I think of Mexico, I think of people like her, original to the land, and people like myself, mestizos, who are indoctrinated oppressors. Brainwashed? Who? But we're Latino, Spanish, Hispanic. No somos indios is what I've been told. You sure about that, I ask people during such conversations? Mestizo means a mix of indigenous and Spanish. Spanish people are from Spain. Indigenous people are from Abya Yala, land in its fullest maturity. now known as the Americas. Our parents come from the Americas and have passed on both indigenous and Spanish blood to us, as it has been passed on to them, I explain. Conversations like this are common in my life, having to explain how and why I identify the way I do, refusing to succumb to the imposed labels Latino, Spanish, Hispanic, and that would mean to cut off one part of me, just as the conquistador in Camarena's painting is cutting into the indigenous warrior defending his land. The conquistador in Camarena's painting first appeared to be standing over his victim. Once examining the painting closely, it became apparent that they are both wounded, both on their knees, and as with any form of war and colonization, both are victims. Still, the conquistador is above the indigenous warrior. Equally, the mentality that Los Conquistadores brought hangs over the heads of mestizos who identify with them. Puerto Rican mixed martial arts fighter Jorge Rivera, calls himself El Conquistador. My mestizo friend Harold has yelled, "I'm Spanish, their blood is in me." During Christmas dinner, my mother has proudly proclaimed that the customs we practice are al estilo español. Through the inculcation process practiced by the Spanish on the mestizaje, a people's true identity has been left in the dark. Slavery of the mind has helped to continue the practice of slavery on the original peoples of Abya and the new people who believe that they are better and different from them. As the fire in Camarena's painting burns strong, so must be the taking back of a true identity. As objects fly in his painting as a result of explosions around the fatal embrace of the colonizer and the colonized, so do the colonial mentalities of discrimination, sexism, and classism need to be blown away. In the same manner that both fighters bleed together, the mestizaje have to embrace both sides of who they are. The eagle claw lying on the ground and the feathers worn as armor must be set free to fly again, so that full bloods and mixed bloods, the original people and the mestizaje, can live together as one. It is this type of abrazo that now needs to be painted. So this is the month that my mom turns 65 and she's retiring. So yeah, she worked hard, big time, put up with my bullshit. So I wrote 3 poems commemorating her. The first one is called The Buzz. The buzz echoes around the room, bounces off walls, creeps into other rooms. It's 4:30 a.m. She throws off her covers, plants her small feet on the ground, and erects her 5-foot frame. A new workday. Teeth brushing, bowel emptying, panties, bras, nylon slipped on. The coffee maker grumbles as she holds a mirror and applies makeup. The cold whispers and the bus hums through the windows. Her fingers unlock, open, shut, and lock the door. She catches the 512 streetcar to Yonge Street, transfers onto the southbound bus, and serves the city's elite salmon and egg whites by 7 a.m. This is called Julia, 20 years. Obviously, my mother's name is Julia, or Julia, to be correct. Julia, 20 years, written on a yellow post-it note. A silver pendant with the name of the social club she works at sits in a box for her. 20 years of waking up before dawn, wet or bright, dark or cold. 20 years of working long hours, carrying heavy trays, forcing a smile, denied her language, losing her position to a younger white woman who was fucking the boss. 20 years of getting old, stress lines on her face, swollen ankles, a broken wrist, a bad back. 20 years of raising a son on her own, seeing him only on weekends, preparing him reheatable dinners, missed parent-teacher nights, key around his neck, steel cutting into his wrists from those supposed to serve and protect. 20 years, cancer creeps in. 20 years is worth 1 silver pin. So this is the last piece I'm reading. And I read a quote today by the very famous and important Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish. And it's a poem called To a Young Poet. And this applies to me, I'm not imposing it on anybody else. What he says is, never ask who I am. You know who your mother is. That's who you are. In terms of your father, be your own father. So this next poem is called I Use My Mother's Last Name. My dad wasn't in my life, so I don't acknowledge him. It's on paper and stuff, but everything that you see, Vallejos, that's my mom's last name. So, I use my mother's last name because he wasn't the one who boiled the pieces together that are now me. He wasn't the one who carried my weight, sore back, swollen limbs, sickness. He wasn't the one who fed me, collecting coupons, hauling groceries, hot stove. He wasn't the one who visited me in the hospital, broken spirit like my bones. He wasn't the one who bailed me out of jail, tearful nights, orando a la Virgen. He wasn't the one who manned up, struggled, strived, pressed on to provide. He wasn't the one. Thank you. So please check out blackcoffeepoet.com, spread it to your friends, and I'm on Facebook as Black Coffee Poet. I'm always looking for poets to feature, specifically poets that are left out of the discourse, usually queer poets, poets of color, female, etc. And please tune in, spread it to your friends, and thank you for coming tonight. Take care.